we dive into a special crossover edition of the show talking football and baseball next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we returned here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen today. We're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. And we're back, a Thursday edition. Actually, it's a crossover Thursday edition today, as we're going to be diving into a special crossover of the show with Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles. Yeah, with the Ravens just before training camp and the Orioles now in the All-Star break, just heading out of it. It felt like a good time to almost talk about Baltimore sports here. The Orioles obviously had that 10-game winning streak. They just finished their 2022 draft. Adley Rutschman has been great for the team. And also, the trade deadline's coming up in a couple weeks there in the MLB. So we're going to talk with Connor about everything. We're going to talk Ravens. We're going to talk Orioles. We're going to talk Ravens and Orioles combined. So a ton to talk about here on the show today. Also, though, a bit of Ravens news that happened yesterday was the Ravens placed undrafted wide receiver Devin Williams on the reserve did not report list. They placed undrafted rookie Ricky Person, the running back, on the reserve left squad list. So there were a couple moves the Ravens did make. We'll talk about those more in depth on tomorrow's show and also throughout the rest of the coming days here. But we are going to be talking some football, some baseball today. And so I'm excited to do so. But if you hear this in audio form, I'll do audio first today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to follow us anywhere you get your favorite podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and turn notifications on. If you heard this on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. Our next goal, 3,000 subscribers here on Locked On Ravens. So why you should subscribe if you haven't already. We put out daily Ravens content 5 days per week. So news, analysis, updates, we're here for you in any aspect you need it. So also be sure to follow me on Twitter at @Hashrecord34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. Without any further ado, let's dive into the content here with Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles. Joining me here now is the host of Locked On Orioles for a Baltimore sports crossover, Connor Newcomb, of course, of Locked On Orioles. And Connor, I know the Ravens have had their fair share of success. The Orioles, I know, have been in a bit of a rebuild, but it now feels like Baltimore sports, both teams, they're coming alive a little bit. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Kevin. And listen, these two teams haven't really overlapped success like this since really the Ravens won the Super Bowl. So this is feeling good.
Yeah, it's exciting. I know the Orioles with that 10-game winning streak, they just wrapped up a really solid draft, and the trade deadline's approaching. So we'll talk about all that in the second part of the show here. But Connor, I wanted to kind of open the floor to you and ask if you had any questions about the Ravens. I know this is a team that has so much going on for them right now after that injury-filled season. So I'll just open up the floor to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what is on everybody's mind is something that I know you've been addressing on your podcast, but Lamar Jackson seems like he wants to be a Raven, and I'm sure the Ravens want him here. And I think a lot of people have their assumptions, but what's the extension holdup is kind of feels like the number one question hanging over the Ravens right now.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's been going on for so long now. It's like time doesn't even exist in this whole thing anymore. But I feel like the main thing with Lamar Jackson is people look at the league as a "what have you done for me now lately" league. And it's almost like what people remember is not the great first half of the year that he had last year. I mean, he was in that MVP conversation, the Colts game last year. I mean, he was putting up all those crazy stat numbers, but then the Miami game, from then on, it was almost like he started to struggle a little bit. He had a minor injury. And then at the end of the day, that injury turned into that bone bruise in week 14 against Cleveland. And then he misses the rest of the year. So I think what he's looking at is, aside from not feeling well that one game, then having the injury, the struggles, all that combined, maybe right now he wants to say, look, I'm going to bet on myself and maybe go the Joe Flacco route, which was he bet on himself, turned down the extension, and then the rest is history. He goes out, has that amazing playoff run, wins the Super Bowl, makes himself tens of millions of dollars. And that's almost like a dumbed down scale for Jackson. Because for him, Flacco made himself money, but I think for Lamar Jackson, if he were to win the Super Bowl, that scale, I mean, it's tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. So right now, coming off of an 8-9 season, not really making the playoffs, if he can make the playoffs, if he can return to MVP form, which I still think he hit, that scale for him isn't on the lower-ish end like Joe Flacco. It becomes a whole nother ball game for Lamar Jackson, and he deserves every penny of whatever extension he gets. I still think it will come in Baltimore. It'd be a pretty big shock to me if it didn't, but I think that's really where it is right now for that.
Yeah, that's how I feel. And I mean, I know Lamar representing himself throws a wrench into this too, that, if he had, your typical NFL agent, I'm not saying a deal would be done, but I think this process would look a little different. I don't think that's a good or a bad thing. It just kind of seems like it's making it go a little differently. But we know we'll get Lamar this year, and I do whatever it takes to get him back in Baltimore is how I feel. Get Lamar in a Ravens uniform for the rest of his career. Now, I do want to ask about something that's kind of been in the media the past couple of days. How do you think this running back room shakes out? Because J.K. Dobbins has been in attack mode on Twitter this week. And, they brought in Mike Davis, who I think is a fine, number 2 if that ends up being his role. But Lamar has shown it's not super important who his running back is, as long as he has someone with a little explosiveness and someone with a little power. It almost feels like the names don't matter as much. But Dobbins might be a special talent. So I just wanted to ask, by week 18, who do you think is the Ravens, active and, used on the field running backs?
Yeah, and it's so interesting you say that, because I think in general, Connor, the position in the NFL is a bit devalued now. It's not necessarily you need to have these $70 million running backs. You can kind of get away with maybe having a third rounder and an undrafted guy and maybe another guy on a cheap deal. But the running back situation last year was such a nightmare, I think, for them. Obviously, losing J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards in such a short amount of time, and even Justice Hill in there too. But they did the right thing by stacking the depth. You talked about Mike Davis, Tyler Beatty, they drafted in the 6th round. If J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards maybe have to spend a couple weeks on the PUP list, or they have to miss a couple games early on in the season, I do know, Dobbins went on Twitter and was very adamant he was playing in week 1. But I think by the end of the season, if we're looking at week 18, I think what it'll probably be is if everybody's healthy. So let's say everybody starts week 1. I think J.K. Dobbins will probably have the most carries, and then that will be followed by Gus Edwards. I think it'll be close. I think Dobbins will have a bit more of the workload, but I think what they're going to do this year is really try to incorporate their guys in the pass game, those running backs in the pass game. I think we were going to see it last year, and then everybody got injured, and so they had to bring in these guys with 10 days to go before the regular season. They have to learn a whole new playbook, get into football shape for some of them like Le'Veon Bell. But they've done enough this year. So where I think that, obviously with the trade of Marquise Brown, them not bringing another wide receiver, it feels like they might only keep 5 wideouts and maybe 4 running backs this year. So if you have Dobbins, you have Edwards, Davis, and Beatty, I think that gives you a lot of depth and also insurance in case either one of Dobbins or Edwards maybe has to spend a little more time rehabbing or getting back to full shape than you might have expected it to be maybe 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah, it should be interesting because we know how good Edwards and Dobbins have been, but they're both coming off serious injuries, so you really never know. I had 5 yes or no questions, Kevin. I'm not letting you say anything else but yes or no to finish up. All right? Start with number 1. Is Greg Roman the offensive coordinator of the Ravens week 1, 2023?
Oh, well, I'm going to say it depends, and I'll give you a short answer why. I think that if the Ravens struggle early on, there might be someone who has to maybe be a scapegoat, and I think that could be Roman based off of everything that's going on. But if he succeeds, then I think 100%, I think he could definitely be Ravens offensive coordinator. I think he's a good offensive coordinator. I think he just has to now prove that consistently he can get the most out of his weapons now.
Yes or no, do the Ravens bring in a free agent veteran wide receiver before the season starts?
Oh, I'm going to say no. I think that I personally think they should, but I think that they want to give their guys a shot here. They have a lot of talented undrafted rookies. I think they trust their young guys, and maybe we see an addition during the year if stuff doesn't pan out. But I think before the year, my guts tell me they're probably just going to roll with what they have.
Yes or no, Ronnie Stanley plays 17 games this season?
I'm going to bet on him and say yes. I think that obviously if he doesn't play in those 17 games, he's never played a full season in his NFL career. I think what you're looking at with him is a player that obviously might be the second most important player on this offense besides obviously the one, the only Lamar Jackson. So I think when you're looking at a player like him, if he can play in these 17 games, he's had a while to rehab this. It was a pretty gruesome ankle injury. It was a really bad thing that he had there. But I think overall he can come back from that. And I think I'm going to bet on him, and I'm going to say, he can definitely play on that.
Yes or no, one of these young pass rushers actually emerges for the Ravens this year and at least gives them a legitimate threat late in the season and moving forward?
I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say it'll be two of them in Odafe Oweh and Dalen Hayes, both of those second-year guys. Oweh showed flashes. Hayes was injured for a lot of the year, but I think those two combined, and maybe we could even see an undrafted guy like Jeremiah Moon come into the fold, but they need that. They need that definitely. I think Justin Houston, obviously not a young guy anymore, but he can provide that leadership. I think they'll have somebody.
And then yes or no, the Ravens win the AFC North?
I think yes. Right now I have them tied with the Bengals at 13-4, winning the AFC North based off of tiebreakers. I mean, this is going to be a really tough division. We don't really know what's going on in Cleveland right now with the whole Deshaun Watson situation. Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh. You can never really count them out at this point, even with Ben Roethlisberger no longer there, and he was kind of on the downswing anyway. But I think this will be a two-team race here between Cincinnati and Baltimore, and right now I have Baltimore kind of edging them out barely.
That's all I got for you. It's almost training camp.
It's almost training camp, and we're going to dive into Orioles talk coming up here on the show, diving into Adley Rutschman, Jackson Holiday, the trade deadline, so much more with Connor here coming up on this crossover edition of Locked On Ravens and Locked On Orioles. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about Built Bar, and there are a lot of great things Built Bar is doing right now, but you've probably tried the amazing Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar, but your friends at Built have now given the Coconut Brownie Chunk the Puffs treatment, so now the Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar flavor you love is now a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of chocolate brownie goodness. And they're only here for a limited time, so go to Built.com right now to make sure you don't miss out. They're going fast because they really do taste amazing. And the best part about Built Puffs, of course, is that they taste amazing, but also that you can enjoy them guilt-free because they're actually good for you. They're a perfect treat, perfect when you've got a craving, you need to satisfy your sweet tooth, or even if you just need a quick, healthy snack, they're an excellent source of protein. So for that delicious coconut, rich, sweet brownie, creamy marshmallow, you can stop fantasizing about that. You get to Built.com to order your box of Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Puffs right now. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15. You get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15. We're back here with our second segment of Locked On Ravens and Locked On Orioles. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles. And Connor, this thing in the air right now, like football's in the air right now, but baseball, Orioles baseball, the Orioles magic is back, it seems like. This is a team that has been rebuilding for a couple years now. I know they have gotten some flack for it from certain social media personalities, ESPN personalities, but it feels like now the Orioles have this 10-game winning streak. They replenished their farm system even more with a very solid 2022 draft that includes Jackson Holiday. I want to start with the win streak, though, and the vibes surrounding this team. It just feels like this team loves each other. They play for each other. And this 10-game winning streak has kind of brought baseball back to Baltimore, maybe a bit sooner than some people anticipated. I mean, how has this whole thing been for you, this almost roller coaster type ride here?
Yeah, it's been kind of unbelievable because of the way they've done it. If you would have told me coming into the season that the Orioles would win 10 games in a row, I wouldn't believe you. But if you told me that, hey, you know, Mancini, Mountcastle, Mullins, Hayes, they're all going to get hot at the same time. The O's are going to score 7 or 8 runs a game, and they're going to rattle off 10 in a row at some point. I would have said, all right, maybe that'll happen. I wouldn't have thought they'd be 500 at this point, but hey, maybe that'll happen. The fact that they've done this with a ragtag group of starting pitchers, giving it their all, and one of the best bullpens in baseball, which is just full of waiver claims, essentially. That's what's been so surprising. I mean, you've got guys like Spencer Watkins, a 30-year-old who the Orioles brought in on a minor league deal last year because he couldn't get to the big leagues with the Tigers, throwing 6 innings, 1-run ball pretty much every time he goes out there. You got Jordan Lyles just eating innings every time, 6, 7 innings. Dean Kramer rebounded from a horrendous 2021 to be one of the Orioles' best starters. They took a Rule 5 pick out of their bullpen in Tyler Wells, and he's their ace. And remember, this starting rotation is doing this without John Means, who got Tommy John surgery, without Grayson Rodriguez, who hurt his lat right before he was ready, and without DL Hall, who literally is striking out every batter he faces in AAA, but for some reason isn't in the majors yet. So it's just been so fun to see that be the way it happens. And here's the even better outlook for the second half is that the Orioles have had some singular offensive performers that have been good, but I actually feel that in terms of the talent in their lineup, their offense is underperforming. So the pitching is going to slip. They just, they don't have the names. It's going to slip at some point. But the offense is going to go back to the mean in the positive direction. And so there's no saying they can't be kind of near 500 when the season ends.
Yeah, and I think part of that conversation is what should they do at the trade deadline, or should they be buyers, should they be sellers? I know that we have seen Trey Mancini's name pop up a little bit in rumors. I mean, Connor, if you're running this team right now, if you're Mike Elias, are you buying at the deadline or are you selling?
I'm in the middle. I'm doing both, I think. I think, I did an episode last week about why the Orioles should not trade Trey Mancini. And I get the reasons why people and maybe the Orioles want to trade him. He, despite his mutual option, it's not going to be picked up. He's going to be a free agent this year. The Orioles have had no extension talks with him, never even a peep. And, he's hitting pretty well. And you have guys who you can, now he's not blocking prospects, but you have guys in AAA who you can fill into that DH role that can produce for you. But Trey Mancini is a 30-year-old who can't really play anything but first base. That usually does not command, no matter how well a guy like that is hitting, usually does not command a huge return in terms of prospects. The couple of guys in single and double A you're going to get are not going to be worth what Trey Mancini means to this team, to this clubhouse, on the field, off the field, to Baltimore with all he's been through in an Oriole uniform. He's the last guy left over from the Orioles' last playoff team. Mancini was a rookie in 2016, actually had a pinch hit appearance in the 2016 AL wildcard game that the Orioles lost. He's the only guy who appeared in that game that was on that roster that's still with the team. He deserves to see this out. And yeah, he's going to walk in free agency, but I wouldn't deal him. Now, the rest of the deadline, things could happen. If a team wants an innings eater in Jordan Lyles, I think he brings really good vibes to the Orioles. I think he saves the bullpen, but I think he's expendable. And if you can get some prospects for him, I think go for it. He's not a part of the future rotation for the Orioles. If someone comes along and wants an Anthony Santander, there's outfielders, including Kyle Stowers, ready to take his spot immediately. If you can make that deal, he's having a good year, send him off. But maybe you package Santander and some of your own prospects for a starting pitcher who is controllable, a guy who, is signed through 2023 or 2024. Not a guy who's maybe an ace, but a guy who's a 2 or a 3 on somebody's staff. And you can, use your prospect depth, because not all these guys are getting to the big leagues. No matter how good they are, there's just not enough spots. You got to trade them at some point. I think this is the perfect time to show your fans that, hey, we know we're not winning the division. We know we're not winning the World Series, but we can see that we're playing a lot better. And if a lot of things break right, we could make the playoffs, especially if they add a starting pitcher. And, they're not mortgaging the future. They're adding to the future by getting a guy who's going to be around for, 2 more years after this. If I were the Orioles, that's what I would target, but I don't see them making, a giant move either way. I think moves will be made on the margins unless they can find that starting pitcher that they might bring in.
Right. And I think part of the reason that they can afford to do something like that is because of their very deep farm system, because you're right. I mean, there's so much talent there. And if you're not mortgaging away the future, you can save that maybe big splash moves for a couple years down the line when things are looking more like, all right, maybe they can win the division here. Maybe they can win the World Series here. So you're still adding. I completely agree with you, Connor. And part of their farm system was this 2022 draft here where they have the number 1 pick. They could go in many different directions. They decided to go with Jackson Holliday, high school shortstop. And it felt like, I don't know, to me, it felt like Drew Jones wasn't really an option for them. It just didn't feel like the pick to me. Tamar Johnson could have been the guy, but they go with Jackson Holliday. Was that a surprise to you, Connor? And what do you think of the pick overall?
Yeah, not a big surprise. I mean, Jackson Holliday was one of the 5 guys who, Mike Elias never named the 5 players, but he continued to say leading up to the draft, hey, we're looking at 5 players. And Jackson Holliday was one of them. He was, I would say, consensus the second best player in the draft. I think generally across the board, most people had Drew Jones 1 and Holliday a close second. And the Orioles, went through these guys and did their due diligence. Remember, they've known they've had the number 1 pick since last October. So they've been able to know that, hey, we get our pick of the litter. Whoever we want is ours. And they didn't go, under slot. Holliday is going to sign for, I think, a little bit less than the slot value, but, he's making more than $8 million in his signing bonus. So they went with what they thought was the best player available. And, what the Orioles do as well, which makes this Jackson Holliday pick make more sense, is you can look through their draft the last couple of years. And one theme is, a lot of the guys that they take, came into the draft with helium. Whether it was, their most recent college season was their best. Or, maybe they went to the Cape Cod League or a summer league before the draft and they really showed out, in those couple of weeks. They're always picking guys who are playing at their best, it seems, as the draft comes. And Jackson Holliday, out of all these guys, had the best spring. I mean, the dude hit almost 700. He set the new high school record for hits in a 40-game season in the country. He had 90 hits in 40 games. I mean, it's ridiculous. So I think, again, they're watching these guys way more than me. I basically knew the 5 names, and I was kind of okay with any of the 5 because I knew the Orioles would most likely pick whichever of the 5 they thought was the best player, and that's what they did.
Yeah, and I think now you have a very bright future on the infield. You have plenty of prospects there. Again, maybe not all those guys do make to the big leagues. Maybe they're used in a trade package, 1 or 2 of them, but I think Holiday was a great pick. I know some people did really want Drew Jones because he's this, consensus top guy, it feels like. But I think for the Orioles, they made the right selection here. And I think Holiday's going to turn into somebody. His father, obviously, Matt Holliday, a very successful outfielder in the MLB for many different years. So I'm excited to see what he can bring. But Connor, before we head into our final break, I think I have to ask you about Adley Rutschman. Just one question about Adley Rutschman, because he's a player that the debut was so anticipated by so many people, and it was like, well, when are they calling him up? When are they calling him up? And it like wasn't happening. Then finally they bring him up, and there's almost like a correlation here. It feels like Rutschman has been almost a spark plug of this team's success recently. I mean, has this been everything you were expecting with Rutschman early on here?
Yeah, and I get you look at the batting average, it's around 220. Maybe it's not what you want, but the plate discipline's been great. He's starting to hit the ball harder and harder. His catching defense, the way he's handled the pitching staff, the pitch framing has all been elite. The bat is going to get to where the bat needs to be, and he's gone on stretches. He's really had 2 cold streaks. He was cold as soon as he came up adjusting, and then he went on one little slump a couple of weeks, but kind of right before the winning streak started. He was on another mini slump. And then, he had some big hits. Over the last couple of weeks, he had a big pinch hit home run on Saturday in the O's last win at the Trop before the break. He's, again, he's not hitting 350. I think at some point in his career he might, but he's doing all you could ask as a rookie.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal player to watch. And I mean, someone who is definitely living up to the billing. Again, the stats might not show you everything you want to see in terms of Rutschman, but he's learning. He's getting better. I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table. But we're going to head into our final break here. Coming up, we're going to be diving into what positions Ravens and Orioles players could play on the opposite team. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Still something to talk about here on both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Orioles. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens and Locked On Orioles. Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Ravens, still chatting up with Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles. And Connor, this is kind of a fun thing I want to do here because it feels like the Ravens and Orioles both have players, very versatile skill sets. So what if some of these guys were to go over and play for the opposite team? I mean, I feel like Lamar Jackson could be getting some run, and we've seen him throw out the first pitch before. It feels like some of that could happen. But for you, Connor, in your mind, what are some positions on the Ravens the Orioles players could be playing? Where would you see Adley Rutschman lining up? Is Austin Hayes the quarterback based off of his accuracy with his arm? Where are you feeling some of these Orioles players could line up on the football field?
Austin Hayes is 100% my quarterback. He can move, and the arm is ridiculous. So the arm strength, check. I'm putting him at QB. I mean, the way I've seen Cedric Mullins patrol center field, he's a free safety in my book. Yeah, he's a little smaller, and he's not going to hit you as hard, but he's going to beat you to the ball, so it might not even matter. And then I could see Adley. Well, the thing is, Adley was one of the best high school kickers in the country, and he was a kicker at Oregon State, so I'll take the easy answer, and Adley's my kicker. He's taking kickoffs. He made a 63-yarder in high school, so I'm taking that one. And then there's a few more guys who, may fit in, but those seem to be kind of the easiest comparisons right there. And, it's tough for this Orioles team because there's so many kind of different pieces that they use and so many guys. I will say, if you've seen the way Tyler Wells is built on the mound, you put him at tight end next to Nick Boyle and nobody's getting in the backfield. So I think that would be my one other one is Tyler Wells at tight end.
Yeah, where would you see Trey Mancini lining up? He's somebody who definitely has a bit of a different build. Where would you see him at?
Yeah, he's got an interesting build. I could see him playing in the slot. To be honest with you, he's not the most majestic runner when you see him go out there. He's just so built for baseball that it's tough to see him out on the football field. Maybe calling out signals as a middle linebacker. Do you obviously have to beef up a little bit?
Yeah, it feels like maybe could he play tight end? Could you see him there?
Yeah, I think Tyler Wells is just built so much better as a tight end. I mean, you get him, Boyle, and Ricard, and you're just running for 300 a game.
Yeah, you throw Ben Cleveland in there, just big mountain Ben Cleveland. You're having a tough time running on that Ravens team and stopping the run, definitely. But it feels like if I were putting Ravens players on the baseball diamond. I feel like I'd have to have Lamar Jackson as the pitcher. I mean, just the way that he's able to control the football. People knock on his accuracy. I just don't see that. I mean, I think he's a very accurate quarterback. So him on the mound, I'm putting him there. His backstop, maybe I'm putting one of his offensive linemen. Maybe I will put Ben Cleveland. Imagine like Ben Cleveland putting on the catcher gear behind the plate there. I think that'd be fun. And then like maybe you could have a big first baseman like Calais Campbell 6'8". Like if you want to put 6'8" Calais Campbell at first, that'd be great. My 3 outfielders, I think I have to put Marcus Peters back there. I think I have to. And then maybe Marcus Williams, because again, like patrolling out there, I think I could see that. And then maybe as another, who's a speedster? Maybe like Devin Duvernay. It would have been Marquise Brown. Do you have someone else?
I was going to say, you put Marlowe out there. You just put the defensive backfield in
that
the
is
outfield.
True. Yeah. You have like a four outfielder rotation you can use out there. And then let me check the infield. Again, like strong, maybe you put Tyler Huntley at third. I know his arm strength isn't the strongest. He definitely had some deep ball accuracy issues, but maybe you put him out there at third. Second, who's up the middle? Do you have any ideas for who's up the middle?
Yeah, I mean, I could, some smaller guys with some hand-eye coordination. So maybe like a James Prochet.
Yeah.
I could see turning double plays up the middle. I would honestly, I see Pat Ricard as a relief pitcher. I just want to put that out there, like kind of, waltzing in from the bullpen in the 8th inning.
Now, is he your closer or is he the setup guy?
I don't know if he's my closer. He would scare some people. So maybe he is coming in to close out the game.
He'd be an intimidator for sure. Maybe that's what you do. If the Ravens, you saw their schedule video, they had Ricard, Ben Cleveland, and Tyree Phillips kind of running out. Maybe you have the intimidator lineup. You have Phillips, Cleveland, and then Ricard is your kind of 7th, 8th, 9 guys, and you can do it that way. But then we need a new catcher, so maybe Ronnie Stanley or something. I don't know.
I got one more I completely forgot. You know who I'm lining up at left tackle? I mean, Felix Bautista. That dude is a mountain of a man. I mean, he is easily protecting the blind side, no question about it.
Oh yeah, we all know that it starts up front for an offense, and I think Bautista can definitely do that. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else, like a 5-man starter rotation. You'd have Jackson as your number 1.
Well, you know who you didn't name? Wasn't Patrick Queen a pretty big baseball player?
Yes, Patrick Queen, a big baseball guy. So
maybe put him at shortstop with Prochet.
Yeah, you could have them turn in double plays. 2020 draft class turning double plays up the middle there. So that good catch there. I completely forgot about that. So I think for the Ravens and Orioles, they could definitely field some teams and maybe win a game or two here competitively against maybe the Aaron Judges of the world and wherever he's going to end up. Who knows? Or a team like the Steelers if you're those Orioles lining up against with Mr. Trubisky or Kenny Pickett, whoever it may be. But I think for both teams, again, it's exciting times right now. The Ravens just about to start training camp. The Orioles coming out of the All-Star break here, and in a couple of days, it feels like football's in the air and baseball is in the air now for Baltimore sports. But Connor, I appreciate you joining me here today. This was really great. I'm excited to see how the Orioles end up maneuvering the second half of the year, maneuvering the trade deadline. And look, the future is super bright for this team.
Yeah, it's a fun time to be in Baltimore right now. And listen, the O's are back. It makes your summer just so much better. And listen, I can't wait. Yankees are coming to town to open the second half. It's going to be a fun weekend at the Yard.
Yeah, the AL East is a division. It will never be forgiving, but the Orioles, in a couple of years, we could be talking about a team that's in the running for that division crown. So, Connor, thanks so much. It was really great talking to Connor. I had a great time, chopping it up with some football, some baseball, and obviously combining both football and baseball in their Baltimore sports. Football's in the air, baseball's in the air. Baltimore sports are back, and I'm really excited for it, definitely. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back tomorrow, I'll be rounding out the week with more Ravens content, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.